NMN, the molecule that could reverse aging, longevity science explained. In 2018, everything changed forever. The World Health Organization officially classified aging as a disease for the first time in history. This wasn't just a bureaucratic decision, it was a paradigm shift that opened the door to treating aging itself. And at the center of this revolution, a molecule called NMN that could be the key to unlocking human longevity. Stay with me, because what you're about to learn could add years, maybe decades, to your health span. Welcome back to Longevity Experts. Here's what scientists have discovered. Aging is a cascade of breakdown triggered by the decline of one critical molecule. That molecule is NAD+, nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide, a coenzyme present in every living cell, essential for survival. When NAD+ levels increase, it triggers a boost in energy production and activates cellular repair mechanisms. But as we age, this entire NAD+ network starts to collapse, affecting everything from our DNA to our mitochondria. The good news? We can intervene. The decline of NAD+ doesn't just make you feel tired. It orchestrates every key hallmark of aging. We're talking about genomic instability, telomere attrition, epigenetic shifts, mitochondrial dysfunction, cellular senescence, stem cell exhaustion, altered nutrient sensing, and dysregulated intercellular communication. Each of these processes contributes to the physical deterioration we experience as we age. And all of them, every single one, are linked to the availability of NAD+. This isn't just correlation, this is causation. NAD+ decline is driving your aging process. Here's the harsh reality. The decline isn't gradual, it's a collapse. By middle age, our NAD+ levels have plummeted to half of what they were in our youth. Look at this graph. This isn't a gentle slope, it's a cliff. And every year that passes, your cells have less of this critical molecule available. Less energy, less repair capacity, less resilience. This is what aging looks like at the molecular level. But here's the thing, this decline isn't inevitable. Restoring NAD+ begins with its critical precursor, NMN. NAD+ levels can be boosted by supplementing with its precursors, and nicotinamide mononucleotide, NMN, is a potent and reliable precursor. Developmental biologist Shin-ichiro Imai's NAD World Framework positions NMN as a critical, systemic signaling molecule that maintains the biological robustness of the entire communication network supporting NAD+. Think of it this way. NMN is the key that unlocks NAD+, which then unlocks enhanced cellular function. Better energy production, improved cellular repair. It's a cascade of benefits, and NMN sits at the very top of that cascade. Now, your body actually synthesizes NMN through a crucial enzymatic pathway. While NMN is naturally found in small amounts in foods like avocados, broccoli, and cucumbers, mammals synthesize most of their NMN from vitamin B3 in the form of nicotinamide. The conversion from nicotinamide to NMN is catalyzed by an essential rate-limiting enzyme called NAMPT, nicotinamide phosphorybosyltransferase. NAMPT exists in both intracellular and a more enzymatically active extracellular form found in blood plasma. This extracellular form is produced by many cell types, including fat, liver, heart, and brain cells. Your body has a sophisticated system for this, but it breaks down with age. For years, scientists thought NMN had to take a complex, indirect pathway into cells. It would be converted to nicotinamide riboside, enter the cell, and then be converted back to NMN. Inefficient, right? But then came the breakthrough. A newly discovered transporter called SLC12A8 reveals a direct path for NMN into cells. This transporter can move NMN directly across cell membranes without any conversion needed. And here's a fascinating detail. The expression of this SLC12A8 transporter is about 100 times higher in the small intestine than in the brain or fat tissue, suggesting a critical role for gut absorption. This is why oral NMN supplementation works. But why can't our bodies just make enough NMN on their own? Because aging compromises both the supply of NMN and its conversion to NAD+. It's a twofold problem. First, declining levels. As we age, the body's natural production of NMN falls. Second, impaired conversion. Even worse, aging itself significantly compromises the body's ability to convert NMN into NAD+. This creates a vicious cycle where the age-related decline in NAD+ accelerates, further impairing cellular function. Less NMN available, and what little is there can't be used efficiently. It's a downward spiral. In preclinical models, NMN demonstrates a wide array of remarkable effects. In numerous mouse models of disease and aging, orally administered NMN has shown profound anti-aging and health-enhancing benefits. It's rapidly absorbed, converted to NAD+ in tissues, and benefits conditions ranging from diabetes to Alzheimer's disease. And here's the exciting part. Older mice appear to be more responsive to NMN in comparison with young mice. This suggests it directly targets age-related deficits. It's not just a general booster. It specifically addresses what goes wrong as we age. Let's break down what NMN actually does in these studies. The catalog is extensive. For metabolism, suppressed age-associated weight gain, enhanced energy metabolism, improved insulin sensitivity, and enhanced insulin secretion. For physical function, increased physical activity, improved eye function, and restored skeletal muscle in aged mice. Neurologically, improved neuronal function in the brain, slowed cognitive decline in Alzheimer's models, improved neuron survival, and helped maintain blood-brain barrier integrity. For cellular health, reversed mitochondrial dysfunction, improved mitochondrial metabolism, and prevented age-linked changes in gene expression. Cardiovascular benefits, protected the heart from ischemia and reperfusion injury. And for inflammation, suppressed age-related adipose tissue inflammation, what researchers call inflammaging. One of NMN's biggest advantages is its practical profile, stability. Studies show that 93 to 99% of NMN remains intact in drinking water at room temperature for 7 to 10 days. This is a stable compound. Absorption. When given to mice by oral gavage, plasma NMN showed a steep increase in just 2.5 minutes, with further increases at 5 to 10 minutes. Rapid and efficient, and safety long-term, 1 full year, of oral administration in doses up to 300 milligrams per kilogram was found to be safe and well-tolerated in normal mice. This safety profile is crucial for human application. The murine evidence is clear, but what does this mean for human health? The results in mice position NMN as a murine fountain of youth. Now researchers are conducting human trials to determine if these transformative effects translate to people. This is where the science gets really exciting, because early human data is starting to come in. Leading researchers are optimistic about NMN's potential, and they're backing it up with data. Dr. Shin-ichiro Imai from Washington University states that NMN may improve adult human metabolism, rendering it more like that of someone 10 or 20 years younger. But it's not just theory. Harvard's Dr. David Sinclair, reporting on his personal experience, noted that his lipid profile has improved dramatically and his blood markers, at nearly 60, are closer to those of a 31-year-old. These aren't fringe claims. These are leading scientists at world-class institutions reporting real results. So here's where we are. The quest to treat aging has begun, and NAD plus biology is at its center. The classification of aging as a treatable condition has unlocked a new frontier in medicine. The decline of NAD plus has been identified as a fundamental driver of this process, and with compelling preclinical evidence of its safety and wide-ranging efficacy, NMN stands as a leading nutraceutical intervention in the scientific pursuit of extending healthspan, the period of life spent in good health. If you found this deep dive valuable, smash that like button and subscribe to Longevity Experts for more cutting-edge longevity science. Drop a comment. Are you taking NMN? What results have you noticed? I respond to every comment. The future of aging isn't about accepting decline, it's about intervention. See you in the next video.